Okay, so now when I talk to people about this idea of animals being equated to slaves.
Well, they are slaves. They might, people might have a problem with them being equated to human slaves in some way, but any being who is a thing, it doesn't have any rights, they're slaves if you're alive.
Okay, yeah, that's what it seems like people get uncomfortable with it.
Well, they ought to be uncomfortable with it. We enslave, we used to enslave human beings, now we enslave non-human beings in very similar ways. It's only a comfortable thing if you don't think about it. Once you start thinking about it, you come into a cognitive dissonance because most people don't believe in that kind of exploitation. And it's something that most of us have really never thought about. And once you start to think about it, it makes you unhappy.
There were many laws that protected human slaves. Many, many laws. And how much protection did those laws provide? Well, close your eyes. What do you see? That's generally the level of protection that slaves got from slave welfare laws. Because courts were called on to adjudicate conflicts between property owners and their property. And there were even courts that said, look, if we're going to have slavery as an institution, it's got to be the case that the slave can't feel that there is an appeal from the judgment of the master, or else slavery doesn't exist as an institution.
Slavery today seems horrendous. We can't imagine how it would be accepted. And so something that seems obvious to us, self-evident to us, was actually obvious and self-evident the other way for thousands and thousands of years. And then there was a time, a transition period, when for some people it was obvious, for some people it wasn't, or some people thought it was self-evidently right, some people thought it was self-evidently wrong. And funeral by funeral, century by century, the people who thought that it was wrong began to gain the upper hand. And when the society was in a position to be able to accept the idea that slavery was morally wrong and ought to be legally wrong, then the law began to shift.
If you have a chimpanzee, you bought it, you legally own it, you don't want it anymore, there's really nothing to stop you killing it. So in that sense, they really are like slaves, and you can make them be your research tools, or you can make them amuse the patrons at a circus or a roadside zoo. I think that that's something that we need to change.
Just as in the 19th century, there was a real schism between abolitionists of slavery and the people who wanted to make slavery more humane. Those people were at odds with each other because the abolitionists said, look, I'm not interested in making an unjust institution more humane. I'm interested in abolishing the institution. And what we have here presently in the United States is a tension. Many animal advocates say, well, what's the difference? Because, if you're working to reduce suffering, that's going to lead to abolition. Let me tell you, there is no historical evidence, absolutely none, that by regulating animal exploitation, it will lead to the abolition of anything. If anything, the empirical evidence is to the contrary. The more you tidy up these unjust institutions, the more comfortable you make people feel about exploiting animals.
The reason I wrote Though the Heavens May Fall was to show how any legal thing, could use the judicial system to be able to show that he wasn't a legal thing. That if you have the right judge, who's a principled judge, you make the right kind of arguments, you have the right time, the right politics, then through the judicial process, you can do amazing things. And one of the things that you can do is that you can change the thinghood of a being to personhood.